Just return to our top story now, the situation in Syria. Joining us once again, Middle East analyst Nabila Ramdani. Great to see you, Nabila, for your insight this morning. What do you make of what we've seen in the last 24 hours or so in this? I mean, we've seen limited evacuations out of Homs, which is an important step forward, but it has been pretty limited. How important is that?
Well, in fact, it's the first break in the siege of Homs, and as you said, it's significant but also tokenistic because it has been very limited, and it's effectively aimed at evacuating the seriously ill and indeed the dying. But you know, alongside that, you have a terrifying average of more than 100 people dying a day, who have been dying in Homs alone over the past few weeks, but also in other areas like the city of Idlib near the Turkish border. And Assad is very much aware of the horrific worldwide reactions following the murder of 2 journalists and what appeared to be a policy of targeting all journalists. And a ceasefire, although brief, is perhaps a means to attract a limited amount of positive PR.
And we have, as you mentioned, I mean, the international concern is being voiced at the meeting in Tunis, of course, and calls to step up sanctions and increase pressure on the regime. Always questions with this as to what can be achieved, but is there still hope that perhaps this level of pressure is actually not being aimed at the top echelons of the Assad government, the Assad regime, but in fact on the middle and lower ranking people who could try to push him out effectively?
Well, I think what the conference in Tunis had tried to achieve is to build up a credible alternative to the Assad regime, and the participants have endorsed the Syrian National Council as a credible and legitimate voice of opposition, but it didn't exclude the recognition of other groups as well. So it effectively failed to recognize the SNC as a plausible government in waiting. But I think the big issue here that is underplayed by everyone is the strength of the Syrian army. Assad can muster more than 500,000 people who have sworn allegiance to him, between active servicemen and reserve personnel. Its annual budget, the army's annual budget, is almost $2 billion. It has great experience fighting in regional wars, including the Gulf War against Iraq, involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict, and Lebanon in the 80s. So we're talking about, you know, a very well-equipped, disciplined army with special forces, which shows how sophisticated it is. Which
I guess is why there is, amongst all the other international political reasons for it, why there is so much reluctance to have any military intervention in this situation as it currently stands.
Very much so. I mean, to give you a comparison, Assad's army is 8 times the size of the army that Gaddafi had in Libya. And Assad also knows that he can rely until the very end on allies such as Iran, Russia, also China to a certain extent, and militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon. Russia is currently the main arms supplier of Syria, providing 65% of Syria's weapons. And Western governments are very much aware that any military action will trigger a full-scale regional war that could go on and on for decades.
It's disturbing stuff indeed. Nabila, thank you.